This is Northern Light for Friday, June 19th. Happy Juneteenth. Good morning. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Catherine Wheeler. On this Juneteenth, we take a look at the abolitionist movement in St. Lawrence County.
If you looked at, say, the Malone newspapers in the 1830s, somebody who was an abolitionist was always followed with the word scallywag. They were not well thought of.
Also on the show, we'll hear from a North Countrywoman who collects Schlitz memorabilia and says with the company ceasing production, she has a tough decision to make.
When you're out of Schlitz, you're out of beer, and in October, early October, I'll be out of beer. I don't know what I'm going to do.
John Warren checks on trail conditions ahead of a wet weekend ahead.
And we'll take a look at Juneteenth events around the region with NCPR's community calendar.
All that's coming up on Northern Light. Stick with us.
Support for Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio comes from the Adirondack Community Foundation, offering donor-advised funds and other charitable giving tools to help individuals and families support the causes they care about. ADKcommunityfoundation.org. And from AJA Architecture and Planning in Glens Falls, providing architecture, planning, and interior design services for residential, commercial, and community spaces throughout the North Country. AJAarchitecture.com.
This is Northern Light. I'm Catherine Wheeler.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Today is Juneteenth. The federal holiday commemorates the day in 1865 when Union troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, and told the last enslaved African Americans that they were free, more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. In the decades before emancipation, some North Country residents advocated for the end of slavery at a time when it wasn't a popular position. An historian in St. Lawrence County has collected the stories of how the abolitionist cause grew here in the North Country. Catherine Wheeler reports.
It took a long time for the abolitionist movement to take root in St. Lawrence County. The town of DeKalb's historian Brian Thompson says the area has an early connection to it through a man who never lived here but was a prominent landowner.
Governor Morris, who the town of Governor and Morristown are named for, was an early ardent abolitionist. He was born in New York State and lived in New York State, participated in the first state constitutional convention to write the first state constitution, and put forward a clause to abolish slavery with the establishment of New York State. And it was voted down. And for that reason, he left New York State and moved to Pennsylvania to live in Philadelphia among the Quakers who were anti-slavery.
That was the 1770s. Thompson says the first evidence of abolition work in St. Lawrence County comes decades later from a sermon at the Potsdam Presbyterian Church in 1826.
And the only reason we know about it was because the text of the sermon was published in a New York City black newspaper.
Thompson says there aren't any mentions of abolition in the local press, even years after the movement started. He says it wasn't considered decent to talk about. Soon, though, a few anti-slavery societies popped up in Bucksbridge and in Potsdam. Then, in the mid-1830s, the Free Will Baptist religious movement spread around the Northeast, making its way to St. Lawrence County by way of a black minister who moved to Hopkinton and preached. In 1837, Free Will Baptist members were called on to do everything they could to advocate for the end of slavery.
They gradually spread throughout northern New York. There was one in Herman at one time, in DeKalb. North Lawrence was the headquarters for a major area, and Fowler. And so those areas where the Free Will Baptists are, you start to find people circulating anti-slavery petitions and submitting them to the federal government.
Thompson says it wasn't easy to be an abolitionist at this time. Racism was common here.
If you looked at, say, the Malone newspapers in the 1830s, somebody who was an abolitionist was always followed with the word scallywag. They were not well thought of.
He says even after slavery ended in New York State, few black families were able to buy land and settle in St. Lawrence County. Even later, in the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan took hold in the area. Before that, Thompson says the abolitionist movement in St. Lawrence County was comprised of everyday people. They weren't particularly wealthy or powerful. They simply had strong moral convictions.
The abolitionists were small-town farmers, shoemakers, small industrialists, people who didn't have a financial stake in dealing with the South and the cotton trade, etc., or depended on keeping their money secure in some New York City bank. It was just the local people, the local working people who were the abolitionists. And that's true not just here. If you look at the abolitionist movement throughout the northeastern United States, they were the people that were the abolitionists.
Thompson says that the abolitionist movement gained more members after the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850. The law allowed police to arrest people suspected of escaping slavery. Judges would determine if they should be returned to their enslavers and were incentivized to do so by getting paid more to return them. Thompson says people couldn't ignore that injustice, and collective opinion kept evolving.
They were like a terrier dog with a rat. They wouldn't give up. They wouldn't give up until finally, by 1856, the majority of St. Lawrence County voters voted for Freeman, who was the abolitionist candidate for president. Even though the Democratic candidate won, it took until that time.
Thompson says the history of the movement shows how public sentiment can change, especially when a small group of people who are dogged in their beliefs continues to push despite ridicule and mistreatment.
I think too many people think that for change to happen, it has to happen through upper status people. And and in fact, both the women's rights movement and the abolitionist movement show us that it's regular, ordinary citizens that can make a change when they stand up.
Thompson says you can find out if your St. Lawrence County ancestors were a part of the abolitionist movement. The New York State Genealogical and Biographical Society houses the St. Lawrence County Abolitionist Database, another way to connect to our local history. Catherine Wheeler, North Country Public Radio, in DeKalb.
This is NCPR. You're listening to Northern Light, only here on North Country Public Radio. It's 8:09. Good morning. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Catherine Wheeler. Stick around. We'll take a look at trail conditions in the Adirondacks and the community calendar ahead of Juneteenth celebrations.
All that's coming up in just a couple of minutes here on Northern Light, which is supported by Barstow Subaru in Potsdam, committed to the safety and security of all-wheel drive. Details at barstowsubaru.com. And from Enka, presenting the High Peaks Farmers Market, a producer-only market featuring local offerings, tomorrow from 9 to 1 at Riverside Park in Saranac Lake. Song Little Love from Roan Yellowthorn out of Plattsburgh.
With just days to go before the primaries, candidates around the state are making their final pitches to voters. The New York Public News Network's reporters Jimmy Vielkind and John Campbell break down some of the key races.
Hi, Jimmy.
Hi, John.
Jimmy, there are both Republican and Democratic primaries happening in offices all across the state. Early voting is underway, and primary day is Tuesday. There's only one statewide primary, though, and that is for state comptroller. Who's running?
Well, the current state comptroller, Tom DiNapoli, is running for a fifth full term, and he's basically running on his record. The comptroller oversees the state payroll, and the office has dozens of employees who conduct audits of government agencies. It also oversees the state's nearly $300 billion pension fund, which pays out benefits to retired public workers.
So who's running against him?
There are actually two challengers, Raj Goyal and Drew Warshaw. Goyal is a former state legislator from Kansas. He moved to New York in 2010 to start a tech company, and he wants to divest that public pension fund from fossil fuels and Israel bonds. Warshaw is a first-time candidate, but he's held some roles in government in the past. He's most recently run an affordable housing company, and he says the pension money should be used to alleviate the housing crisis. He's also calling for those same divestments like Goyal.
Jimmy, the candidates debated a few weeks ago, and DiNapoli says his focus is on investment returns for the pension fund. He says he's gotten rid of some fossil fuel investments and that the Israel bonds aren't an endorsement of Benjamin Netanyahu or the current war in Gaza.
I look forward to growing our state pension fund to protect the retirement security of our 1.3 million public workers in New York who depend on the strength of that fund, to continue our audits and investigations, to make government more efficient.
Later in that debate, DiNapoli said his challengers have an overinflated view of the job.
That's really interesting. I talked with both Warshaw and Goyal, and they both say that the comptroller should be doing more. Analysts say that Democrats are hungry for fresh faces. Here's how Goyal described his reason for running.
Democrats want fighters, not folders. And when I think about what is truly the embodiment of wasted political power, it's the state comptroller's office in New York.
Warshaw has made the case that while DiNapoli is a nice guy and has the backing of the Democratic Party, voters should think about whether someone else could be better. Here's him speaking in that debate.
We do have power. It's right here. We just need to use it. I will choose to build the housing we need, to lower our electricity costs, and to stop wasting our tax dollars on handouts to Wall Street bankers.
John, another race you're watching is in the lower Hudson Valley. Democrats in the 17th district are vying to take on GOP Congressmember Mike Lawler.
That's right. This is a seat Democrats are really hoping to flip, but this is a very crowded primary. There's 5 candidates, and right now they're spending money trying to beat each other rather than beat Lawler. So I asked Suzanne Berger about that. She's the Westchester County Democratic chair.
My preference would have been to have a primary with 2 or 3 candidates so that the winner of the primary would have a clear majority going into the general election, which I think would be helpful.
She thinks the frontrunners are Rockland County legislator Beth Davidson and Kate Conley, who was a counterterrorism official in the Biden administration. The other candidates are Tarrytown trustee Effie Phillips Staley, former television reporter Mike Sachs, and Air Force veteran John Capello. And Jimmy, you recently reported on a GOP primary farther north.
That's right. Republicans Anthony Constantino and Robert Smullen are in a bitter fight to succeed Congressmember Elise Stefanik, who's retiring. This is interesting to me because President Trump has backed Constantino, a first-time candidate, but lots of Republican leaders in that 15-county district are with Smullen.
So this is really a test of the power of that Trump endorsement.
That's right, and Trump has a pretty good track record in Republican primaries.
I'll talk with you after the polls close.
Take care.
That was New York Public News Network reporters Jimmy Vielkind and John Campbell breaking down some of the key races ahead of primary day in New York. That day is Tuesday. You can find all of NCPR's election coverage on New York's 21st congressional race at ncpr.org/election.
Plattsburgh is putting new rules in place for businesses that use large amounts of electricity, including facilities tied to artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, mining, and data storage. The new law applies to operations that use more than half a megawatt of power. Companies that want to open or expand those facilities will need a city permit before moving forward. They'll also be required to create a minimum number of full-time local jobs based on how much electricity they use. City leaders say the goal is to protect Plattsburgh's municipally owned electric system and help keep energy costs from rising for residential customers.
Forest rangers in the Adirondacks had to rescue hikers nearly every day last week. Emily Russell reports.
Last Monday, a hiker in their 50s from Potsdam called for help from the Dix Mountain Wilderness. Paramedics and rangers hiked in and gave the person IV fluids. They then determined that the person couldn't hike out on their own, so rangers carried the hiker for more than 4 hours back to the trailhead. Then on Tuesday, a trail crew worker from the Student Conservation Association who has epilepsy had a seizure while working in Avalanche Pass. They were flown out of the woods in a state police helicopter. Rangers got an emergency notification on Wednesday from a hiker at the Wolf Jaw Lean-To. Rangers helped the dehydrated person back to the trailhead. Last Thursday, a person from New York City got lost while kayaking on Long Lake. A ranger found the paddler and helped them back to the lodge where they were staying. Finally, rangers responded to 3 rescues last Saturday evening. A hiker on Basin Mountain was having trouble breathing and was helped out of the woods by rangers. At the same time, a hiker got dehydrated while on the trail to Gray Peak. The 32-year-old from Connecticut was rescued by the state police helicopter. Another pair of hikers got lost that same evening near Putnam Brook and Keene. They were located by 2 forest rangers and helped out of the woods. Emily Russell, North Country Public Radio.
New York's Office of Children and Family Services launched the state's first Fatherhood Steering Committee this month. Troy Grant is the head of fatherhood engagement for the agency and is the first full-time fatherhood policy advisor in New York. Grant says fathers who are present for their children's lives make a big difference, but they don't always get the support that they need.
When we look, and we actually look at the data, we know that when dads are positively and intentionally engaged, the outcomes for our children and families are better. But when we look at the other side, we see that dads are not being engaged and are actually being overlooked in services.
The state's Fatherhood Steering Committee is made up of 33 advocates with lived experience. They'll meet monthly to provide recommendations on how to improve outreach to fathers in New York.
The slogan used to be, if you're out of Schlitz, you're out of beer. Well, Schlitz beer, once the largest brewer in America, is ceasing production. The news will hit especially hard for one woman in St. Lawrence County. For decades, she's collected Schlitz memorabilia. David Summerstein visited her Schlitz museum back in 2011.
Okay, hi, my name's Michelle Whalen. We're pretty close to Morristown on the St. Lawrence River. I live here with my wife, Valerie. And it's a 162 square foot closet, but half of it is dedicated to all of my Schlitz memorabilia. I paid $20 for this light in Florida, probably 20 years ago, and I paid $20 for that Schlitz neon. The white is broken, but I paid $20 for that. But everything else has been given to me. I mean, there's 4 or 5 of the flashlights. There's every kind of glass you can imagine. There's old bottles. There's dozens and dozens of glasses, different sizes. There's salt and pepper shakers. There's lights. There's clocks. There's little cans. Who is this woman that's holding the globe, and the globe is surrounded by the Schlitz emblem? I mean, when you're out of Schlitz, you're out of beer, right? This bottle, Carrie DeMars gave me. It was bottled in Ogdensburg by Arnold and Company. It's like ancient. I've been drinking Schlitz since August 30th, 1972. Yeah, I was drinking with my friends Bugsy and Susie down at their camp, and everybody drank Schlitz in 1972. It was like top of the line. It was good beer.
What is that?
They're coasters.
What?
They're coasters. They're little Schlitz coasters. See, it looks like a beer bottle, but the back comes out, and there's about 6 coasters in here. When you're out of Schlitz, you're out of beer. It is the absolute best beer. I mean, it's water to me. It's like you got to have it. If there was no other beer on earth, if they said, no, we can't make Schlitz anymore, I'd be like, I'd take it again as a sign from God that I'm not supposed to drink beer anymore. This light, I think I stole this light from my friend Floss. She's okay with it now, though. But all these were old magazines.
Michelle Whalen of Morristown and her Schlitz Museum speaking with David Summerstein in 2011.
So, of course, the question is, what is Michelle going to do now that Schlitz is going out of production? David called her back. She says she has enough Schlitz to last until October.
Since I'm only drinking 1 or 2 beer a day. It's not like I'm drinking a 6-pack a day even. I'm drinking 1 or 2 beers, 2 on a hot summer day. I love the taste of beer, and I hate to quit drinking, and I really don't like other beers after drinking Schlitz for almost 54 years. It'll be 54 years at the end of August.
Is Schlitz that much of a difference from like Miller Lite or something like that?
Oh God, no light beer. If all there was light beer on earth, then I truly would quit drinking beer. When you've been drinking something religiously for 54 years, it's what tastes the best to me. When I go to Florida, you can't get Schlitz down there anymore either. It's I drink Red Stripe, but I don't even think I can get Red Stripe up here. I've only seen it like a 6-pack of it once at Price Chopper.
Has anybody given you recommendations of what you should do?
I have a cousin who suggested I drink champagne. And so obviously she doesn't drink any alcohol or much beer because the difference between champagne and Schlitz or any beer is pretty significant. She also suggested maybe just a vodka tonic, but those things aren't beer. Beer is special. I mean, I've got, David, do you remember from years ago doing that first interview with me? I've got an 8x10 picture of my dad and his Army Air Force buddies all sitting around a table, all in their uniform, and all drinking Schlitz beer. And that was back in the early 50s. So when you're out of Schlitz, you're out of beer. And in October, early October, I'll be out of beer. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Schlitz superfan Michelle Whalen speaking with David Summerstein. She says, by the way, her Schlitz Museum memorabilia is for sale, and she's taking offers. This is NCPR. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. It's 8:23. Good morning. I'm Monica Standreski.
And I'm Catherine Wheeler. Stick around after the show for Bird Note. That's coming up at 8:42. With our eyes to the skies, sunset in Paradox is at 8:40 tonight, and the moon is a waxing crescent at 27% to full.
It's 16 degrees right now in Kingston, Ontario, 65 degrees in Queensbury and in Plattsburgh, too, 55 still in Saranac Lake, 60 degrees in Fort Drum. We can expect cooler temperatures today with rain showers and still a little breezy, less breezy than yesterday. Highs expected to be into the mid-60s to mid-70s throughout the region. A chance of showers and a good chance of thunderstorms tomorrow and another chance on Sunday, too, with highs expected to be pretty mild. We'll look at how all of this impacts the trail conditions in the Adirondacks. Here's John Warren with the New York Almanac.
In the Adirondack high peaks on Saturday, the sun will rise at 5:11 a.m. and set at 8:43 p.m. The summer solstice will take place at 4:24 a.m. on Sunday. Sunday will be nicer, but expect unsettled weather through the weekend in the mountains, and a chance for some afternoon showers today and tomorrow everywhere, along with some of the coolest temperatures we've seen in a while. High peak summits are expected to be socked in with clouds through the weekend, with temperatures only reaching the mid-40s and wind chills up high getting down to around 30 degrees tonight. Wear layers and be prepared for cold weather and rain. Temperatures in the 40s and rain will create a much higher risk for hypothermia. Some water crossings may be difficult or impassable as well, especially as waters rise from recent storms and localized showers through the weekend. The Hudson River will rise toward 4 feet on the gauge in North Creek. The Racket River is expected to rise above 6 feet at Piercefield. Lake Champlain is rising to about 96.5 feet, Water temperatures there remain mostly in the mid to upper 60s. That's the same temperature as Mirror Lake, which fell a bit this week. Over in the western Adirondacks, the Massaweppi Conservation Easement is closed to the public for the season. You can still access the Conifer Emporium easement by way of Massaweppi Town Line Road, however. And in the Lake George Wild Forest east of Lake George, the bridge at the outlet of Shelving Rock Brook in the Day-Use area near Shelving Rock Bay has now been replaced, and that area has reopened as well. Those are the outdoor conditions in the Adirondacks this weekend. For North Country Public Radio, this is John Warren from the New York Almanac. Online at newyorkalmanac.com.
Little music here from blues musician Solomon Hicks. He'll be performing this evening as part of Plattsburgh's Juneteenth celebration at the Retro Live alongside the Plattsburgh State Gospel Choir and poet Elijah Hendricks. They're planning to have a large dance floor and high-top tables and chairs and a real dance environment. Again, that's tonight at 7 at Retro Live on Margaret Street in Plattsburgh in honor of Juneteenth today. Communities throughout the North Country are celebrating this. It's a day of remembrance, unity, and celebrating Black joy and Black culture.
If you're in the Westport area in about 30 minutes, there's a Juneteenth hike at the John Brown Trail. It's a guided historical hike honoring the abolitionist movement from 9 to 11 o'clock today. It's a pretty nice trek, approximately 1.7, about 2 miles. It's an easy hike. That's at 9 o'clock today at the John Brown Trail in Westport.
In Saratoga Springs at the YMCA, they're hosting a Messages of Freedom Day today. You can head out there around 11:30 with Bring Your Kids Too for a drumming circle. Also, there will be a community freedom quilt, a children's story corner, and culminating with a cultural celebration program starting at 1 o'clock. They'll have music and poetry, interpretive dance, an historic performance, and guest spotlight speaker Ms. Nell Stokes. That's today at the Saratoga Springs YMCA, starting at 11:30 and going until 4 o'clock this afternoon.
Tomorrow is the 13th annual Watertown Juneteenth at the historic Thompson Park in Watertown. Music, art, vendors, that's in Thompson Park tomorrow in Watertown.
Also tomorrow, Potsdam is hosting their Juneteenth celebration. It's family-friendly. Everyone's welcome. They'll have a Black is Beautiful fashion show, a presentation from the Adirondack Diversity Initiative, and music from jazz guitarist Benjamin Mambu and hip-hop artists K-Twist, FM3, Odessa BPM, and Just Do, and several featured speakers, including the SUNY Potsdam Black Student Alliance, who will be doing a reading from the book African Americans of St. Lawrence County, and from the Reverends Heidi Chamberlain and Howard Kane, too. Again, that's the Potsdam Juneteenth celebration tomorrow from 3 to 8 at Ives Park.
Another opportunity to learn a little history with a bus tour of the Underground Railroad from 10 to 4 tomorrow at the North Star Underground Railroad Museum in Ausable Chasm. The tour will go from Keysville, Peru to Beekmantown and Plattsburgh, stopping at key sites in the area, including churches involved in the abolitionist struggle and local cemeteries. Among the reenactors will be the great-great-grandson of local Underground Railroad leader Stephen Keyes Smith. That's tomorrow at the North Star Underground Railroad Museum in Ausable Chasm from 10 to 4.
Always lots to do in the North Country. Find out more at our website. That's it for the show. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Catherine Wheeler. Be well.